So I'm going to turn it over. We've got Dr. Victor Fishman, Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David, and others. So I'd like to turn this over. So if you guys would come on, we'll go ahead and get this thing going. Hello, everyone.
David, thank you so much. We're very, very pleased to be with you all, and we're hanging in there because the amount of information that we've been capturing here today is just amazing and will help all of us as we move forward and we focus on our challenges associated with resilience in every area and supply chain in every area. So I want to welcome all of those who are with us today. Our second panel, of course, supports the overarching theme is supply chain resilience and national security. Our panel is comprised of leaders who have come to share their insights and experience in this area, and also discuss new creative models for collaboration with our allies. So without further delay, and because we're just a touch behind, I want to tell you who our panelists are and then ask them to introduce themselves. We have Tambrein Bates, who is a former special operator, founder of SoftWorks and current founder of GovWorks. And I want to say, Tambrein, thank you for your service. Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David, Army strategist and civil affairs officer, currently stationed in the UK. Arnel, thank you for your service. Adam Bazih, a venture capitalist and CEO of Amorphology. And you're going to be amazed at the kinds of things that Amorphology is able to do here. Tony Delgado, program manager, additive manufacturing, Defense Logistics Agency. Tony, thank you for your service with the Army. And Terry Pohlen, retired Air Force colonel, associate dean in the G. Britt Ryan College of Business at the University of North Texas, and professor of logistics. Terry, thank you for your service as well. Tambrein, if you would take a couple of minutes and just introduce yourselves. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, hey, Victor, I really appreciate the introduction. My name is Tambrein Bates. I am the head cook and bottle washer of GovWorks. Was also the founder of SoftWorks, as you alluded to earlier, and just happy to be a part of it all.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Arnel, Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David, would you please introduce yourself?
Thanks, Dr. Fishman. Lieutenant Colonel Arnel David. I'm over here in the United Kingdom serving in the NATO Allied Rapid Action Corps. As you said, I'm an Army strategist, and thanks to you and AFS for having me on here. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you. Adam Bazih from sunny California, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Again, Adam Bazih, CEO at Amorphology. Amorphology is a NASA Jet Propulsion Caltech Lab spinout company, and very excited to be here and talk about our company and hear more from everyone else on this distinguished panel. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Tony Delgado from
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, Victor. And like you said, I spent some 30 years with the Army, went to Baghdad, did my tour at the Pentagon, did the Army War College. So I went to DLA, worked on the Strategic Network Optimization Project, and now I'm in the DLA R&D doing additive manufacturing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Dr. Terry Pohlen.
Hi, I'm Terry Pohlen.
Yourself.
And as Victor indicated, I'm an academic now in my second career. Been out of the Air Force a little over 20 years. While I was in, logistics officer the entire time. Great to see some folks from DLA on. My last tour was at the Defense Supply Center in Columbus.
Wonderful. Terry, thank you so much. So Tambrein, given your role at SoftWorks and your experience in the field, how would you characterize the challenges of finding technology-driven solutions, given getting new technology through the supply chain and into the hands of operators? Big question. What do you think?
That is a big question, and there's a lot to unpack there. But being sensitive to the time and the audience, I think number one, we live in very interesting times, moving from kind of a counterterrorism focused effort into great power competition. So I think that's obviously changing a lot of our focus on the supply chain side. But I think my sense of it has always been, we've always kind of struggled with both the requirements and contracting process just across the board to feel new cutting edge technologies. And I think what's really interesting to me is as we're shifting focus and with the onslaught of technology, what's also occurred is that's kind of forcing us to move towards more non-traditional suppliers and supply chains and methodologies. And so it's a very interesting dynamic because my sense of it is not only are we needing to do that to keep pace with our adversaries, but that also is now, because there are more non-traditional means and non-traditional players that are involved, that's kind of exacerbating that already challenging space of of the requirements in contracting. And so that's like from a 30,000 foot level. I think that's always been a challenge. I do like a lot of the efforts that the government, is undertaking when it comes to things like a SoftWorks or a DIU, or just being willing and bold to try new ways of getting new suppliers and technologies into the marketplace. But I always kind of worry in the back of my mind too, because we always have there's some new things that are coming on board that are kind of maybe necessary, but they're kind of unproven. We don't know what's going to happen to the marketplace. And that's two real things. CMMC is on the horizon, which is going to be a big shift for a lot of our suppliers. And then even very real things that aren't as ethereal that we can measure, like our current degradation due to COVID, right? I'm living it in real time, helping friends in some of their manufacturing spaces. Just pretty good timing. Even this morning, I am fighting car companies to get little IC components at the board level to get boards built that are going into technologies that our warfighters need today. So they're very real issues that I think are very interesting that we need to work through as a nation. But I think just overall, I'm really excited to be a part of it. I think panels like these, some of the discussion is needed to really kind of break through some of those log jams and identify real issues that we can really tackle to solve the challenges and get our warfighters what they need.
Tambrein, thank you so much. Very, very insightful and helpful. And the problem that you cite with those chips is part of the real supply chain issue and the whiplash problem that we have getting started back up again when we're trying to get moving. Arnel, in much the same way as Tambrein's efforts working with allies to ensure commonality of items and processes and procedures, there must be challenges that are locally and culturally driven. How does the U.S. work with our allies on those kinds of issues?
It's a great question, Victor. First, thanks to Tambrein for a lot of what he's done to help transition technology into the hands of soldiers and operators of the government. Got to meet him in Tampa. He's done some really amazing things for us all. So thank you, Tambrein. It's good to be on here with you. It's an honor. So it's a great question about how are we working with our allies? Just to keep it short, quick story. I got here in 2018, and the focus was in Europe. It was really changed up with General Christopher Cavoli coming in, taking over U.S. Army Europe. And if you don't know, we recently reorganized the command so that U.S. Army Europe and U.S. Army Africa combined, so that General Cavoli was promoted in December. He's a 4-star general now. And when I first got here in 2018, he was focused on studying the theater. And that meant, how do we move things over here logistically? What do our supply chains look like for the DoD? And we had this conversation, and he had it with all our allies and partners right there in the open. And we worked together and collaborated in a number of ways to check on ports, to check on the RF tags at ports to make sure that they're secure, that those networks are secure. All the way the flow of all things coming from the U.S. to really, just like the keynote had said this earlier, if we show any weakness, it invites aggression. So the only way to preserve peace to be strong. And in Europe, there's definitely some good leaders, incredible leaders doing that. So the focus has been strategic readiness, and that means like working with our partners and allies at the ports, at these airports. How do we flow goods in here safely and securely? And so that's what we've been doing, and that's, I guess, it's one example of the great teamwork that's happening over here in Europe.
Arnel, thank you so much. Very much appreciated. And really, we talk about having to cover a lot of ground from a program management standpoint. you cover a lot of ground from a program management standpoint and literally. So thank you for making all that happen. Adam, we talked a bit about getting new technology-driven products into the supply chain. Amorphology's technology has so many important applications across commercial and defense supply lines, yet it's all new. So could you take a minute and tell us about the technology and why it's so important for the US to continue to invest in high-tech materials and manufacturing startups?
Sure, yeah, pleasure. So, I mean, really at a high level, Amorphology is utilizing what's something that's called amorphous metals or amorphous alloys. And basically they're not crystalline metals. So if you think of traditional metals like titanium, stainless steel, or aluminum, they have what they call crystalline subatomic or crystalline atomic structure. So they're very ordered. Our metals, and this is through a processing step that we do, basically those metals become amorphous or random in order at the atomic level. And kind of fast forwarding, the results of these amorphous metals are pretty incredible. It gives us the ability to produce complex, small parts. Like if you take very complex planetary gears, strain wave gears, fasteners that might go into aircraft, et cetera, inserts. Many of these products today go through, multiple complex CNC production and finishing steps. So heat treatment steps, finishing steps, et cetera. Well, with the amorphous metal technology and our associated manufacturing, we can make those steps make those parts in literally 1 to 2 steps. So instead of going through, hundreds of CNC steps, literally we can go from feedstock to finished parts in, 2 steps. And in many ways, our technology is akin to how plastic parts are made, except we're using metals, and the tolerances and surface features that we can achieve are really cutting edge. They're at the micron level. In addition, many of our parts and gears that we make are able to run lubrication free. They don't rust. That's additional properties of the amorphous metals that we work with. And as you can imagine, this has tremendous opportunities for, defense, aerospace, biomedical, robotics, more. And this, technology was homeborn. It was born in the US. It came out of Jet Propulsion Lab in NASA. And because it kind of flips the paradigm by which precision parts are made, we can do this at much lower cost, and that gives us the ability to manufacture locally, domestically. In addition, we can improve delivery times and rapidly kind of adjust production levels in real time to meet demand, whether that's an increase or decrease. And overall, I think it's important as a nation and ecosystem, of government and private institutions, which I think is so robust and such been a great service to our nation, that we continue to support these technologies like Amorphology, but others as well. We need to allow them to flourish and build roots, overcome that sort of startup chasm of death, as they say. And by doing so, then, we can improve the products and things that we touch and interact with, and the things that we rely on for defense, whether it's computers, phones, planes, it doesn't matter. All of these things have a material and manufacturing component to them. And it's, important that we support the startups and technologies that give the US a competitive edge. And, I think it was stated earlier by one of the panelists, that we live in times where there is lots of, aggression and people looking for weaknesses and other countries investing in various technologies. And we have to continue to be on the forefront and do that and support that ecosystem.
Adam, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the insight into the Amorphology technology. As one who spent a little bit of time worrying about helicopters and gearboxes, it's music to my ears. Tony, being an R&D manager at the Defense Logistics Agency, you certainly know that logisticians provide a crucial link between invention and product application. Would you take a minute to share your insights on how the logistician can further define their role to support supply chain resiliency and security?
Yes, Victor. DLA certainly has a very central, critical link between that invention and transitioning that to the supply chain. DLA is a we've heard today a lot about really big companies, right? Well, let me tell you a little bit about DLA's business. Our conglomerate consists of acquisition, storage, distribution, disposal operations. We operate in 46 states, 28 countries, interconnected systems, processes, facilities, infrastructure, suppliers, transportation nodes, users, employees. We have 42 billion dollars in contracts on a yearly basis, 26,000 employees, 6 major subordinate commands, 3 regional commands that support directly the geographic combatant commanders. So we have 9 supply chains that distribute around the world, and these include food, textiles, energy products, medical material, construction, industrial hardware, personal demand items, major end items, and repair parts. So, you know, what this topic about supply resilience is very important to DLA. We not only deal with COVID, but with natural disasters, criminal activities, diminishing manufacturing, cyber attacks, non-conforming businesses with counterfeiting. So when you talk about inventions, like Adam was talking about, you know, we have scientists every day trying to improve weapon systems and providing equipment for our warfighters that are in jungles, mountains, the desert, under the sea, up into space. And DLA supports all these points of needs. So when somebody brings an invention to the logistician, we got to be careful that we're not introducing a weakness into the supply chain, right? So DLA has certain focus areas to avoid this. We embed supply chain security across the DLA enterprise in order to have access to our partners, nation partners, vendors, critical resources around the world. We try to maintain integrity to key data in our systems, and we partner with valid, reputable vendors who produce quality supplies and services to our warfighters. So that's how we strengthen the resiliency of our systems and processes and infrastructure and people, is maintaining good relationship with very good vendors and inventors that are out there.
Tony, thank you very much. I used to pass the depot in Columbus, Ohio, just about every other day. And I always marveled at the amount of material that was moving through there, you know, compared to any place else I would happen to see, even when it comes to large industrial processes. So DLA really has their arms around quite a complex.
Mm-hmm.
Terry, I guess the supply chain and marketing department at the G. Brent Ryan College of Business at the University of North Texas can almost be described succinctly as supply chains are us. Given that Texas produces more natural gas than any other state, and yet we suffered a natural gas shortage during this recent cold snap, would you take a minute and share insights about what supply chain resilience really means in an operational sense?
Well, Victor, when I look at resilience, I really look at it from 4 key elements. You know, first is the upfront planning for the unexpected. Many people refer to that as risk management. And that's where you would be mapping out your supply chain, looking beyond the first tier to the second tier, in some cases, 3rd tier suppliers, assessing each one of them and determining where there's vulnerabilities, as well as developing deep relationships with those most critical branches or roots of your supply chain. I think of a supply chain like a tree ripped out of the ground, shake the dirt off. You got branches going back to your suppliers, you got roots going down to your customers. All of that needs to be managed. We heard visibility mentioned several times today, and that's why that is so important. But then also, as Nigel mentioned earlier on, he said robustness. And I think, you know, that's kind of the second element, the ability to absorb a shock, a disruption that's occurring in the marketplace, and being able to, you know, flex with that. But then the third is, how do you respond to that disruption when it occurs? And having been on several different discussion groups, even things like food products, we saw major shifts in the distribution channels where you had manufacturers, suppliers that were supporting restaurants have to shift overnight and support all those people going to the grocery stores, now eating at home and cooking at home. Different packaging, different distribution channels. And so that agility piece is very important. But lastly, and I think this is a part many of us forget about resilience, is that once we recover from the shocks, we have to adapt to a new environment. And so as we come out of the pandemic, as we come out of this storm here in Texas, there are going to be a variety of new changes that are going to occur with many of these supply chains. And we've got to be able to adapt to that new environment. You know, like right now with the new administration, there's going to be new regulations, new looks at supply chains. Coming out of the pandemic, you're going to see companies revisiting their supply chains, reshoring, doing many other types of things. So a key point that I wanted to make in response to your question is that resilience is not static. It is evolutionary, and we're going to see companies have to cycle through this as they look at their supply chains, understand them, get that visibility, get that experience, and then go through it again.
Terry, thank you so much. Very, very insightful. And it sounds to me based on a lot of experience as well. Tambrein, I have often heard it said that the government has a hard time knowing the commercial markets that are essential for the development of their robust supply chains for new technologies. And we touched a little bit when we talked to Adam about this, but how would GovWorks help fix this capability gap?
No, it's a great question, Victor, and I appreciate it. You know, GovWorks is a 501c3 modeled primarily after SoftWorks. So the idea was to really help the government at all levels with GovWorks find those non-traditional partners and attract them to prevent, you know, as Terry said, you know, kind of this reshoring. We kind of want to prevent that on the front side, right? Can we get our non-traditional folks, you know, contracts and get them teamed up with the government so that stuff never gets offshore? So I think part of that is, you know, the idea and the philosophy behind GovWorks was to cut across all those silos of excellence. For example, you know, cybersecurity is a great example. Every tendril in the government touches cybersecurity, but they have a very hard time connecting with each other. And so, you know, most of their requirements, contracting, and expertise remain invisible to what I think is 90% of the marketplace. And that's what we saw borne out during my time at SoftWorks. So the goal is to really work with all of government and industry to synergize and catalyze all those types of efforts and create, you know, hubs focused around, you know, what the White House released as the 20 critical and emerging technology areas. And so think of it as, if you will, not only as centers of excellence for the entirety of government to come to, but also think about our industry partners, right? Be they traditional or non-traditional. If you if you were in cybersecurity, you would know exactly where to go, kind of one-stop shopping to see what the government needed and to address their concerns. And so really that's kind of the idea and focus behind it, is to, again, synergize and catalyze those efforts so we can get new, novel, and provocative capabilities into the supply chain for the warfighters.
Tambrein, thank you so much. You know, I was interested in the comment you made about hubs around the US. Could you take just an additional minute and tell us about this hub concept?
Yeah, so SoftWorks was a hub that was really completely focused on the United States Special Operations Command in Tampa. And so when we had a lot of folks come through, and you know, usually the types of questions I would get is, how can you scale this so that all of government could take advantage of it? And so we really gave that a lot of thought over about a couple of years and started really thinking about how we could do it. And the idea was, well, instead of being, you know, a customer-centric organization, let's be a technology-focused organization, and then subsequently serve all of the government as the customer base. And so we actually stole a few good ideas from some of our Five Eyes partners and some others that are out there. we developed what we call the 5-hub concept. And the 5 hubs, think of it, if you will, for those of your audience that are familiar with SoftWorks, was the idea was to have 5 SoftWorks and called GovWorks established around the US at locations to be determined. But amongst those 5, we would divide up, and each one would get 4 of those critical and emerging technology areas from the White House's innovation group. And so anywhere in the government and anywhere in industry, if you were interested in interfacing with the government, you would know which hub that you needed to go to that was focused on your capability or technology need. And that's where you would focus a lot of your efforts. And so the idea is to really create a lot of synergy around that, cut across those silos of excellence, and get everybody working together so that we can kind of really leverage not only our dollars and go a lot further together, but also, again, to synergize and catalyze our industry partners, right? Be it non-traditional and traditional alike, and assist them with, contracts, trusted capital, and other things that are of import to our government partners as well.
Tambrein, thank you so much. Very, very helpful. Arnel, so how do global and national leaders set the right course regarding supply chain policy? How do they avoid pitfalls of deploying strategies that don't balance or optimize short-term and long-term performance? So I got a couple of questions there. Take them in any order you like.
It's a big one. So short-term and long-term, it's always a hard thing, right? In the government, especially for us in the military, we post, 1 to 2 years. So getting people to be disciplined and do the hard brain work behind looking out forward is always a challenge. So and that's tough. I would say that to make good policy, incentives are important. How do we incentivize cooperation across industries, but within government between agencies? And so that's really important, and that's key for us to have long-term success and improve our performance and to compete more effectively across different domains. So that incentives are very important. That we need to think about that. How do we incentivize more cooperation? And then finally, another quick point is understanding. Like to make good policy, you're gonna have to understand what's going on in the environment. So people are gonna have to really take the time. These organizations, you're gonna have to have feelers out there to understand. You can't really act without understanding. So you have to communicate with a host of different organizations, just like SoftWorks, GovWorks, research labs. All these organizations we need to talk to. That's what's great about this platform is that we're having this discourse right now, and it just needs to continue. And it just doesn't stop. We just got to continue to communicate with each other and learn, and so you can understand and create good policy. There's no other way around it. So incentives and communication.
Arnel, thank you very much. We've heard a number of our panelists say today that not only is it communication in the people, and you're exactly right, you've added the idea of incentives, and clearly that helps drive the process. Thank you so much. Adam, to be in the supply chain of the range of customers that you envision, what role do you see Amorphology playing in the manufacturing sector, both domestic and global? Also, what role does the international partners currently play in your business? And is that something that you need to look at?
Yeah, great set of questions. And as we all know, there's no doubt we're living in a global ecosystem of commerce, networks that are completely interconnected, supply chains, et cetera. I think what's interesting is, again, we sort of flip the paradigm based on the way we do manufacturing, which is kind of a little bit different from some of the traditional metal manufacturing. And our products and solutions actually have strong customer demand from overseas. And some of the traditional products that, we make, high precision gearboxes, and again, kind of small precision components that might go into aircraft or space systems. A lot of those, believe it or not, are traditionally come from, overseas, whether that's Japan, Korea, China, Germany, and Europe. And now we sort of have the ability to make those components locally, domestically, and do them even more cost competitively than the competitors can. And, again, I think, what makes us a little bit unique is, having the full capability of producing, testing, and delivering parts domestically, locally. This also includes production of our alloys and feedstock material. We, do that all domestically. And kind of at a high level, international players are really primarily playing a customer role. We do get some of our, key pieces of equipment that we use to process and do other things come from overseas, but primarily international, partners are in the customer role. But from a production standpoint, we're pretty much made in the USA all the way. As we continue to scale, we are a growing startup, and our production methods are unique that, we can continue to service these precision metal parts locally, and we plan to continue this production domestically. That's our goal, is we will scale our production domestically, shipping, of course, internationally, but locally as well. And I think, in summary, tightly coupled to our long-term strategy is a vision for augmenting domestic manufacturing, creating new skills and jobs for America's tomorrow's workforce in America.
Adam, thank you very much. Clearly, the focus is on being able to make what you need to make here in the US and to be able to actually deliver that product or make that product near the point of need. So you have all of that capability and skills. One of the things I think as you continue to put together your scaling program, okay, you're going to have to pull back from some suppliers that are overseas, I would imagine. Okay. Can you talk about the challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, primarily for us, it's on some of the equipment pieces. So, I mentioned that our process is kind of similar to plastics injection molding. So that means we have to make, molds and dies and tools that we use to, basically create the negatives for the parts that we want to then, create our metal pieces out of. And, a lot of that equipment, comes from overseas. Anecdotally, when we were looking at purchasing the equipment that we needed just to outfit our facility that we have today, one of the big centers for this is in Germany. And, walking around, one of the few Americans that's walking around looking for this type of equipment, and almost no US companies making this type of equipment. So one of the things that we've started, strategically internally is how do we develop some of this equipment on our own? So as we scale, we can be a little more self-reliant. And there's some efficiency trade-offs there, of course, but I think it's an imperative. And just speaking at a higher level outside of Amorphology, I think it's so critical that we invest in U.S. Strategic scale up, both the equipment that's making the parts and the equipment that's making the equipment. I don't think we think through that enough, and it's just critical that gets developed. And we're thinking about that as Amorphology every day.
Wonderful, Adam. Thank you so much. Tony, we haven't talked about your additive manufacturing activity, but it's evolving in both manufacturing and the commercial space. And given where you sit, what are the lessons learned and best practices that can be leveraged by both logisticians and manufacturers to optimize solutions and industry adoption here?
Yeah, additive manufacturing, Victor, it's, we've been talking about expanding the manufacturing base in the United States, right? And not be so dependent. And additive manufacturing, if you go to any manufacturing floor these days, there is an additive manufacturing machine in there because that's the wave, right, of the future. But like I said in my last comment, that I talked about the speed of transitioning technology into the supply chain. Additive manufacturing is one of those that receives a lot of scrutiny in terms of introducing a part into a weapon system. Of course, it's like any other part, right? The failure of a part can cause loss of life. But in the case of additive manufacturing, because it's the new kid on the block, it's scrutinized very heavily. So DLA has, partner with industry and academia to try to build that trust about these parts and to identify what do we need to do to get those parts into the supply chain. We have assumed a strategic role in the DoD's additive manufacturing ecosystem with a project called the Joint Additive Manufacturing Acceptability, or JAMA. We do have projects in our small business innovation shop, and we also have projects like microcircuit cases with additive manufacturing. And in the medical field, you've seen the advances that have happened there. The project objectives that we have right now are to develop common criteria for identifying the best additive manufacturing candidate parts. So it's not just about can we make it, but should we make it? The should cost model for that. We also are looking at common AM data sets for those technical data data sets that we get, and also common quality acceptability criteria. So when we receive the part at DLA, we can test it and accept that part. We have established clear requirements on how to interface with the DLA business processes once that requirement comes in, that AM requirement comes into our door. At the DoD level, there is a joint additive manufacturing working group in which DLA is part of it as well. And all the military departments and the agencies have created a common workspace for sharing internal processes and solutions to improve product quality, train the workforce, which is a big part of introducing additive manufacturing, and looking for those data management solutions that keep our supply chains secure. The biggest lesson learned out of all this is that data is king, right? Therefore, you need to have good schemas to organize your technical data. You have to have the ability to protect your data in ways that you can still share it among, the military services, DLA, and the commercial sector. In terms of resiliency, additive manufacturing has the potential to keep or improve the weapon system performance through better designs, decrease production lead times, and provide options to alleviate diminishing sources. So in terms of what additive manufacturing brings to our manufacturing base, that's where we are in this journey with additive.
Wonderful. Tony, thank you so much. Quick question. When all of us first started thinking about additive manufacturing, we were thinking about plastics and polymers. But I know you're thinking about a range of materials. Can you share just a little bit about that?
Right. So, right. Everybody started making knobs or little Star Wars figurines and all that, right? You got to have one of those in your shop. But no, we're looking at parts, right, that have fire, smoke toxicity, have to meet those performance levels or airworthiness parts. So yeah, we're looking now at metals, aluminum, titanium parts that we can incorporate into the weapon system. So it has matured a lot and it's grown a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I just can't even imagine what the future holds for this technology and its application. Indeed. It's going to be amazing. Mm-hmm. Terry, we've heard a great deal of discussion about reshoring, nearshoring, and domestic production. When it comes to China, the Wall Street Journal reported at the end of last week that China had commissioned an internal effort to study the impact of limiting rare earth metals export to the US. What are the most significant challenges associated with reshoring strategy from China to other export locations?
Well, first of all, there has been some reshoring going on. When you look at 2018, 2019, a year-over-year decrease of about 1.6% in imports from China. Then when we looked at the first 3 months of 2020, prior to the pandemic really taking effect, we saw a continued steady decline in terms of the amount of imports coming from China, largely due to the tariffs that were imposed by the previous administration and that are very likely to occur under the Biden administration, and also the USMCA trade agreement, which really affected like the automotive industry. But some of the key challenges that are going to be associated with trying to reshore out of China is, first of all, just the sheer magnitude of trade that goes on between our two countries. In 2020, we imported over $435 billion of goods from China. That's 18.6% of our total imports. Now, when we also compare that to like Canada and Mexico, they're dwarfed by over $100 billion in trade. To put that in perspective, we import $100 billion a year just from Germany. The difference between China and Mexico is what we import from Germany in a year. So the shift from China to another country is going to pose some obstacles because of the amount of trade that we've already been doing with them. But as General Levy mentioned earlier, semiconductors for automotive plants this year have been an issue. 20% of the world's semiconductors are produced in China, another 20% produced in Taiwan and in Southeast Asia. There's a tremendous amount of concentration that has gone on with manufacturing with China, because manufacturers tend to congregate because they want to get the economies of scale, take advantage of short transportation distances. Also, they want that skilled labor. And so China offers some very distinct advantages in those regards. And that even gets into infrastructure issues. We got a lot of logistics, people on the call today. But when you think of China, they have invested heavily in their infrastructure. They have the greatest ports probably in the world right now. They have built airports, they've built highways, they've built railroads. No other country that we are looking at as alternatives have that kind of infrastructure, coupled with the skilled labor that they have in China, and also in terms of access to second-tier suppliers and critical raw materials. Now, another reason why we see concentration like in the semiconductor industry is a semiconductor plant costs about $10 billion to build. So if you're going to spread those costs out and bring the cost per unit down, you got to have lots of volume. So to try and build and replicate that here in the United States, where we do, in North America, we do produce about 20% of the semiconductors, that's a tremendous amount of expense. And then we'd have to have the skilled labor to go along with it. And that skilled labor is going to be an issue, because even if you go like from China to Vietnam, yes, they've got some skilled labor, but not with the relationships that you already have built with those factories in China. Also, you're not going to have the infrastructure in countries like Vietnam. So those types of issues are going to continue to be a play, skilled labor, infrastructure. And then the other key thing that many companies are voicing about leaving China or reshoring out of China is China is soon going to be one of the world's largest markets. And companies are going to be very reluctant to walk away from that huge consumer market that is forming in China. So although you might see some manufacturing reshore, I think it's going to be more dual shoring, especially when we talk, commercial enterprises, because they want to be able to be in that Chinese market. They want to be able to sell to that Chinese market. So those are the key points that I see as obstacles to reshoring out of China.
Terry, that very insightful and very, very helpful. Clearly, the challenge with our suppliers in China is a very complex issue, and will probably play out not only in supply chains, but on the world stage across all of our relationship elements with China. Well, this has been wonderful. I've learned a tremendous amount, and I really appreciate you panelists being with us today. We've got just a little bit of time for closing remarks. So I'm just going to run down and our panel and let you share your final remarks here. So Tambrein, if you would share a couple of final remarks.
Hey, Victor, I appreciate that. Yeah, I would just say to your, not just the other panelists, but, to all the audience as well, it's really going to take all of us. For a while, I've always felt like we've just been nibbling, kind of dabbling at the kind of change that's needed. I think what we really need is both from government and industry, the leaders, to think very boldly about the steps that we need to take for the supply chain, not just, from both micro and macro, the individual components that go on boards, but then also, attracting non-traditionals and keeping pace with our adversaries, and quite frankly, the necessity to outstrip them. I think if we don't do that, kind of as a friend told me once, we'll be the dinosaurs, right? Top of the food chain right up until the day we're extinct. So, I think that it's just going to take that bold vision and leadership to really get us to where we need to be.
Tambrein, thank you so much. And I couldn't agree with you more. And the leaders that we've had on today, I think, are pushing that envelope. So thank you. Well, be well, stay safe in Arizona. Lieutenant Colonel David.
Hey, Victor. Yeah, thank you. And on the same similar vein that Tamara just said, I was going to say, I mean, this is a whole of society approach that we should all be thinking hard about this. And what I would ask all these patriots that are on here that are listening from the U.S., push us, those of us in uniform still, to be a part of this problem. You know, we need to think about it collectively, and so that we should be a part of this and help out with how we can come up with better strategies, how we can be more competitive across different spaces, because we have to. If we can't win if we don't compete. And so we have to get into these places where, you know, there's access being monopolized by countries like China or other competitors. So it's going to take all of us to work together and to come up with creative strategies. So, you know, thanks a lot to AFS and to you and the other panelists for letting me be on here. It's been great.
Arnel, thank you so much as well. Adam, closing comments.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, you know, a big thank you to the fellow panelists. It was an honor to be on with you, the hosts, and the audience as well. See some good questions. You know, I think it's been said, and it's probably obvious, but just emphasizing how critical it is a, you know, really a community and nation that we, you know, continue to invest in manufacturing and supply chain. I think Tambrein said it best. You know, it really requires this coordinated effort. It's an ecosystem. And, you know, Terry mentioned that, you know, China's built this great ecosystem, and some of that might be moving to Southeast Asia and other areas, but, you know, we have the capability to be able to do that. And economically, it may not make sense for every single thing, but for at least the critical types of components and things that are necessary for our growth and competitiveness, I think it's absolutely critical that we take the long-term vision to invest in and grow and foster that type of growth from manufacturing, supply chains, distribution, logistics, you know, all of it. And Amorphology, we're a small part of that, but you know, we hope to be helping out and making a positive impact. So again, thank you so much for having me on this panel today.
Adam, wonderful. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, there was a question about your raw materials. Yeah, I think you've answered that, but you might want to speak to that in general so that the audience as a whole can hear it.
Sure. So yeah, just to repeat the question in case people didn't see, they were asking if we use rare earth metals, and particularly kind of elements that might be, you know, cornered by the Chinese, so to speak. And the answer is no. We don't use rare earth metals in our raw feedstock. Just like crystalline metals, though, we have different formulations. There's a variety of alloys, and most of our elements can be sourced directly from the U.S., Canada, Australia, South Africa. You know, some of the elements are in China. We tend personally to not use those as much, mostly for kind of quality issues. But yeah, in general, we kind of have multiple sources, including domestic, for a lot of the elements, and if not all the elements that we use in our alloys. And I think the key step, not to overemphasize it, but is how those alloys or feedstock is made, how those alloy formulations are put together is really one of the kind of important things for our technology. And that we do all domestically, unlike a lot of the, you know, raw materials that come from overseas where it's formulated and master alloyed overseas. We don't have to do that. We do that all domestically.
Wonderful. I love a domestic secret sauce.
Exactly.
Tony, final comments.
Hey, Victor. So, you know, DLA's mission has been the same for years, and in the nation, we all have the same mission as a supply in the supply chain business: feed, fuel, move people, care of our people, arm them, and restore them in case of our war fighters, right? So, like we've been saying, I just want to echo the words from our panelists. The strategic choices are: where do we get these supplies? How do we maintain those access to those supplies and maintain the security in our supply chains? So, thank you very much for inviting me, Victor.
Tony, thank you thank you very much as well. So it's appropriate that the supply chains are us out of the University of North Texas. Dr. Terry Pohlen, deliver our final comments. Your thoughts, Terry.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb. I've heard a lot of discussion today about resiliency and looking at it as a cost and new burden to the supply chains. I'm going to make the argument that just like we saw with CT-PAT for the major importers where they had to secure their supply chains, that we're going, you know, when they implemented CT-PAT, many of them found they got new efficiencies out of their supply chain and their costs actually came down. I'm going to make the same argument with resiliency. As we work more closely with our suppliers, as we understand their processes, as we have better visibility, as we become more agile in these supply chains, we're going to find that we're going to have a competitive advantage. And we're going to actually bring many costs down because we have too many disjointed supply chains today. Somebody said earlier, the bullying that goes on. What we need are collaborative relationships, and that will come through a focus on resiliency. So I don't look at resiliency as a new added cost to supply chain management. I look at it as a new opportunity where we can drive further efficiencies and make our US supply chains even much more competitive.
Terry, thank you so much, and absolutely end on a high note here. Thanks to all the panelists. Can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time and making the contributions and sharing your insights here.